Baby saw. A pregnant mother bear. Covered in oil. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through the tall pine trees surrounding the small cottage where Rose Collins lived with her husband Liam and their 10-month-old daughter Emma. The cottage sat at the edge of Pinewood Forest, a serene place where wildlife roamed freely and humans respected nature's boundaries. Little Emma was an unusually observant baby, with bright blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. That morning, while Liam had driven into town for supplies, Rose settled Emma on a soft blanket on the porch where she could safely play while Rose hung laundry in the yard. Emma cooed happily, reaching for the colorful wooden blocks her father had carved for her. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of wildflowers, and birds chirped melodiously in the distance. But suddenly, a different sound cut through the peaceful morning. A low, distressed grunt that made Emma pause her play. She turned her head toward the tree line, her tiny fingers still clutching a red block. The sound came again, more pained this time. Rose was busy with the laundry, her back turned to the forest edge. She hadn't noticed the unusual sounds, but Emma had, the baby's gaze fixed on something moving slowly at the edge of the clearing. A large, dark shape emerged from between the trees, moving with obvious difficulty. Emma watched, fascinated, as a massive mother bear stumbled into view. But something was terribly wrong. The bear's thick fur was matted with a black, sticky substance that dripped onto the forest floor with each labored step she took. The bear's eyes reflected pain and fear as she struggled to move. Her enormous belly hung low. She was heavily pregnant and clearly close to giving birth. The thick oil that covered her body made it almost impossible for her to walk without slipping. She tried to lick the substance off her paws, but this only seemed to distress her more. Emma watched, her innocent eyes widening as the bear collapsed onto her side, her breathing heavy and strained. Emma made a soft babbling sound, dropping her wooden block. The bear's head jerked up at the noise, her dark eyes finding the small human child on the porch. Instead of aggression, her gaze held something else, a desperate plea that transcended the boundaries between species. The mother bear tried again to stand, slipping in the oil that covered her fur, a pained moan escaping her throat as she protected her swollen belly. In that moment, something extraordinary passed between the baby human and the mother bear, a connection of innocent compassion meeting desperate need. Emma began to crawl toward the edge of the porch, drawn by an instinct she couldn't possibly understand but somehow couldn't ignore. Her tiny hands gripped the wooden boards as she moved toward the steps, each movement bringing her closer to the distressed animal. Rose turned just then, her heart nearly stopping as she saw her baby daughter crawling dangerously close to the edge of the porch, and beyond that, a large bear at the forest's edge. "Emma!" she gasped, dropping the damp sheet she'd been hanging. But before she could move, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. A forest green truck pulled up beside their cottage. The words, "Pinewood Forest Ranger Service" emblazoned on its side. The door opened, and Oliver Hayes stepped out, his experienced eyes immediately assessing the situation. The veteran forest ranger had been patrolling the area after reports of illegal dumping, when he'd spotted something unusual at the Collins cottage. Now he stood frozen, taking in the scene before him. A baby crawling toward the edge of a porch, a mother reaching desperately for her child, and beyond them both, a heavily pregnant bear covered in what appeared to be crude oil, struggling to move and clearly in distress. "Don't make any sudden movements," Oliver called softly to Rose, who had stopped in her tracks. I think she's too weak to charge, but we can't be sure. He reached slowly into his truck for his equipment, never taking his eyes off the unusual tableau before him. The bear watched them all, her eyes moving from the approaching ranger to the baby, who still gazed at her with innocent concern. "She's pregnant," Rose whispered, carefully picking up Emma, who immediately began to fuss and reach toward the bear. "And covered in oil. How did this happen?" Oliver's face darkened with anger. There was a report of illegal oil dumping upriver. She must have walked through it or fallen in. He approached slowly, carrying a container of specialized cleaning solution and thick gloves. "She's suffering. That oil will suffocate her if we don't get it off, and in her condition..." He looked at the bear's swollen belly with concern. Just then, the bear let out a sharp, piercing cry that made them all jump. She rolled slightly onto her side, her body tensing visibly. "Oh, no," Oliver breathed. "I think she's going into labor." Rose clutched Emma tighter, but strangely, the baby remained calm, her eyes fixed on the suffering animal. "What can we do?" Rose asked, her voice shaking. "We can't just let her suffer." Oliver hesitated only a moment before determination crossed his face. "We have to help her, now, or we'll lose her and the cubs." He turned to Rose. "I need your help, but the baby..." "I'll put her in her playpen inside," Rose said quickly, turning toward the house. But as she did, Emma began to wail loudly, reaching desperately toward the bear. The bear's eyes followed the crying baby, and remarkably, she seemed to calm slightly at the sound. "Wait," Oliver said, a strange look crossing his face. "The bear, she's responding to your baby. I've never seen anything like it." What happened next would forever change how the people of Pinewood Forest understood the connection between humans and wildlife, especially when compassion bridged the gap between the most unlikely of friends. "Keep Emma in your arms, but stay back," Oliver instructed, his voice low and calm despite the tension crackling in the air. Rose nodded, cradling her daughter, who had stopped crying and was now making soft, cooing sounds toward the bear. "I've dealt with wildlife in distress before, but never anything like this." The bear watched them with wary eyes, her massive body trembling from pain and fear. Another contraction visibly rippled across her oil-slicked body, causing her to let out a mournful groan that seemed to pierce straight through to Rose's heart. As a mother herself, she recognized the sound of maternal distress, a language that transcended species. "The oil is from the Blackwater Mining Company," Oliver said grimly as he prepared his cleaning supplies. "They've been dumping waste illegally upstream. I found 3 contaminated sites this week alone." His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he mixed a gentle cleaning solution in a bucket. "This solution won't harm her or the cubs. It's specifically designed for wildlife rescue." Just then, the sound of another vehicle approaching made them all freeze. A dusty pickup truck came barreling down the dirt road, skidding to a stop beside Oliver's Ranger vehicle. A tall man with a weathered face and cold eyes stepped out, a company logo embroidered on his jacket: Blackwater Mining. "What's going on here?" the man demanded, striding toward them with an air of authority. His eyes narrowed when he spotted the oil-covered bear. "That's company property you're messing with." Oliver straightened to his full height, placing himself between the newcomer and the bear. "This is Marshall Davidson, the operations manager at Blackwater," he explained to Rose, before turning back to Davidson. "This bear is suffering because of your illegal dumping, Marshall, and she's about to give birth." Davidson's expression hardened. "You can't prove anything, Hayes. Besides, it's just a bear. There are plenty of them in these woods." His dismissive tone made Rose clutch Emma tighter, a protective instinct flaring within her. "Just a bear," Rose found herself speaking up, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. "She's a mother fighting for her baby's lives. How would you feel if someone said that about your child?" Something flickered in Davidson's eyes, a brief flash of emotion quickly masked by his stern demeanor. He glanced at Emma, then back at the suffering bear. For a moment, no one spoke, the only sound being the bear's labored breathing and Emma's soft babbling. The standoff was broken by a heart-stopping sound. The bear let out a roar of pain so intense that birds scattered from nearby trees. She rolled completely onto her side, her body contorting as the labor intensified. "We don't have time for this," Oliver said urgently. "She needs help now." He turned his back on Davidson and approached the bear carefully, speaking in soothing tones. To everyone's amazement, the bear seemed to understand that help had arrived. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, watched Oliver with what could only be described as desperate hope. Rose stepped forward too, still holding Emma, who had stretched her tiny hands toward the bear as if offering comfort. "What can I do?" Rose asked, keeping a safe distance but unable to simply stand by. "Talk to her," Oliver said without looking up as he began to gently apply the cleaning solution to the bear's fur. Animals respond to human voices, especially calm ones, and for some reason she seems connected to your baby. Rose began to speak softly, the same soothing tones she used when Emma was upset or couldn't sleep. "It's okay, Mama. We're going to help you. Your babies are going to be fine." The words flowed naturally, one mother to another, transcending the boundaries of species. To everyone's surprise, Davidson didn't leave. Instead, he stood watching, his expression unreadable as Oliver worked quickly to clean the worst of the oil from the bear's fur. After a long moment, he walked back to his truck. Rose felt her heart sink, thinking he was abandoning them, or worse, calling for reinforcements. But instead, he returned with a first aid kit and several blankets. "I have a dog at home," he said gruffly, avoiding their surprised gazes. "These might help." He handed the blankets to Rose, their eyes meeting briefly. Something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement, perhaps, that some things mattered more than company profit margins. The bear's labor was progressing rapidly now. Oliver worked methodically, cleaning the oil from her face and paws first, ensuring she could breathe properly and wouldn't ingest more toxins when she inevitably tried to clean herself. Rose continued her gentle murmuring, with Emma adding her own baby sounds to the strange chorus of comfort. "The first cub is coming," Oliver announced, his experienced eyes noting the bear's changing posture. "This is the most dangerous part. If she feels threatened, her maternal instincts might turn aggressive." But something extraordinary was happening. The bear, instead of growing more agitated, seemed to be drawing comfort from their presence. Her eyes kept returning to Emma, as if the innocent baby represented something pure and trustworthy in a world that had brought her nothing but pain and danger. As the first cub began to emerge, a tense silence fell over the unusual gathering. Davidson had moved closer, his earlier hostility replaced by a reluctant fascination. "I've never seen a bear give birth," he whispered, his voice unexpectedly soft. The first cub slid into the world with a rush of fluid, tiny and slick with birth matter rather than oil, thanks to Oliver's quick work. The mother bear immediately tried to reach her baby, but her movements were still hampered by weakness and remaining oil. "She needs to clean the cub," Oliver said urgently, "but she can't reach it properly." Without hesitation, Rose stepped closer, still holding Emma. "Show me what to do," she said firmly. Oliver handed her a clean cloth soaked in warm water. "Mimic the mother's licking," he instructed. "Gentle strokes to stimulate the cub's breathing and circulation." Rose knelt a safe distance away, using the cloth to carefully clean the newborn cub as the mother bear watched with exhausted but attentive eyes. Emma babbled excitedly, reaching toward the tiny cub with curious fingers. "Never thought I'd see something like this," Davidson murmured, his hard exterior cracking further as he knelt to help Oliver continue cleaning the mother bear. "A human helping deliver bear cubs in my 15 years working these forests." "There's a second cub coming," Oliver announced as the mother bear tensed again. The process repeated: birth, gentle cleaning, the cub being placed where the mother could reach it now that her front paws were clean enough to tend to her young. By the time the third and final cub arrived, a surprise to everyone, as black bears typically had 2 cubs, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. The mother bear, though exhausted, was now clean enough to care for her babies properly. Oliver had worked miracles with his gentle touch and environmental cleaning solution, removing nearly all the toxic oil without causing further stress to the already traumatized animal. Davidson stood apart from the group now, making a call on his cell phone. Rose heard snippets of the conversation, something about full investigation, environmental protocols, and personal responsibility. When he returned, his face was etched with lines of fatigue and what appeared to be remorse. "I've called for a proper wildlife rescue team," he said, avoiding Oliver's searching gaze. "They'll monitor the mother and cubs, make sure there are no lasting effects from the oil." He paused, then added more quietly, "And I've ordered all dumping operations suspended pending a full company review." Oliver's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's unexpected." Davidson shrugged, looking uncomfortable with their attention. His eyes drifted to the bear family. The mother now curled protectively around her 3 tiny cubs, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but clear with maternal devotion. "Some things matter more than quarterly profits," he said simply. As if understanding the significance of the moment, Emma let out a delighted laugh, pointing at the bear cubs with chubby fingers. The mother bear raised her head, meeting the baby's gaze one final time. In that look was something that transcended human understanding, a connection between mothers, between innocence, between lives that would never cross again but were forever linked by this extraordinary day. Liam's car pulled into the driveway just then, his expression changing from confusion to shock as he took in the scene before him, his wife and daughter near a wild bear with cubs, a forest ranger covered in oil and grime, and a man he recognized as the notoriously difficult manager from the mining company, all looking like they had shared something profound. "Rose?" he called uncertainly, stepping slowly from the car. "What's happening here?" Rose looked up at her husband, tears streaming freely down her face now that the tension had broken. "Something miraculous," she answered, her voice thick with emotion. "Something that will change everything." And she was right. The events of that extraordinary day would ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the small clearing where a baby's compassion had sparked an unlikely chain of events. The story of Emma and the bear would spread through Pinewood Forest and beyond, changing hearts and minds about the delicate balance between humanity and the natural world. But that was for tomorrow. For now, as the twilight deepened around them and the forest prepared for night, there was only this moment, a moment of profound connection between species, a reminder that compassion could bridge the widest divides, and that sometimes the purest wisdom came from those too young to understand the boundaries that adults had created between themselves and the wild. In the days that followed, the Collins family found themselves at the center of an unexpected storm. News travels quickly in small communities like Pinewood, and by sunrise the next morning, word had spread about the miraculous bear rescue. Local reporters arrived first, their cameras capturing images of the forest's edge where the extraordinary birth had taken place. By afternoon, larger news outlets had caught wind of the story. A baby who had somehow formed a connection with a distressed mother bear, leading to a rescue that defied conventional wildlife management protocols. "I still don't understand it," Rose confided to Liam as they watched Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib that night. The baby's face was serene, showing no signs of the remarkable role she had played in the day's events. "She's just a baby herself. How did she know the bear needed help?" Liam gently stroked his daughter's soft hair. "Maybe that's precisely why," he suggested quietly. "She hasn't learned to fear yet. She hasn't been taught the boundaries we create between ourselves and nature." Outside their cottage, a temporary wildlife monitoring station had been established. Oliver had arranged for round-the-clock observation of the mother bear and her cubs, ensuring they recovered properly from their ordeal. The cubs, 2 females and a male, were growing stronger by the hour, their mother's milk providing the nourishment they needed despite her recent trauma. What no one had anticipated, however, was Marshall Davidson's complete transformation. The mining company manager had returned to Blackwater headquarters that evening and called an emergency board meeting. By midnight, he had not only suspended all dumping operations, but had also committed significant company resources to a comprehensive environmental cleanup of the entire watershed. "I saw something today I can't explain," he told the skeptical board members, most of whom had never ventured into the forests their operations affected. A baby and a bear. There was a connection there that made me question everything we've been doing. 3 days after the rescue, as media interest began to fade, a more troubling development emerged. The mother bear, though recovering well from the birth, showed signs of internal damage from the toxic oil she had ingested while trying to clean herself. The wildlife veterinarians brought in by Davidson's team delivered the grim news to Rose and Liam on a rainy Thursday morning. "Her liver is failing," Dr. Samantha Winters explained gently, her eyes reflecting the sadness of her diagnosis. "The toxins in that particular type of crude oil are especially damaging to the hepatic system. She's strong and she's fighting, but—" The veterinarian's voice trailed off, the unspoken prognosis hanging heavily in the air. "How long does she have?" Rose asked, unconsciously cradling Emma closer to her chest. The baby had been unusually fussy since the previous evening, as if somehow sensing the bear's declining health. "A week, maybe less, Doctor," Winters replied. "Our main concern now is the cubs. Without their mother, their chances of survival drop dramatically. They're too young to be released into the wild, but permanent captivity isn't ideal either." That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rose found herself drawn to the porch where their extraordinary adventure had begun. The monitoring station's lights glowed softly in the distance, a constant reminder of the fragile lives being guarded there. Liam joined her, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. "I keep thinking about those cubs," Rose whispered, "about their mother fighting so hard to give them life, only to leave them alone in the world." Liam nodded, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Oliver mentioned they might transfer them to a wildlife rehabilitation center in Montana. They specialize in orphaned bear cubs. The word orphaned hung between them, heavy with meaning. Both were thinking of the same thing, Emma waking repeatedly through the night, crying out as if calling to someone who couldn't answer. The following morning brought unexpected visitors. Marshal Davidson arrived at their door, accompanied by Dr. Winters and a distinguished-looking older woman introduced as Dr. Eleanor Roberts, a leading wildlife behaviorist who specialized in interspecies communication. "I've been studying the footage from the birth," Dr. Roberts explained as they sat around the Collins kitchen table. Emma was in her high chair, unusually subdued as she pushed her breakfast around with tiny fingers. "What happened here goes beyond anything documented in scientific literature. Your daughter displayed what we call intuitive empathy, an extremely rare phenomenon where very young children form cognitive and emotional connections with animals that adults simply cannot." Rose glanced at Emma, who was now watching Dr. Roberts with unusual intensity. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Roberts leaned forward, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "It means Emma somehow understood the bear's distress on a level that transcends normal human-animal boundaries. And more remarkably, the bear recognized and responded to that understanding." Davidson cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "We didn't come here just to discuss theories," he said, his businessman's pragmatism reasserting itself. "We have a proposal." The proposal was unprecedented. Blackwater Mining Company would fund the creation of a specialized wildlife recovery center right there in Pinewood Forest, focusing specifically on animals affected by environmental contamination. The mother bear and her cubs would be the first residents, receiving state-of-the-art veterinary care while remaining in their natural habitat. "We can't undo the damage we've caused," Davidson admitted, meeting Rose's gaze directly. "But we can try to make amends. The center would create jobs for the community and establish Pinewood as a leader in wildlife rehabilitation." It was a generous offer, but even as the adults discussed logistics and funding, Emma became increasingly agitated. She began to cry, a heart-wrenching sound that silenced the conversation immediately. Rose tried to comfort her, but the baby continued to wail, reaching toward the forest with desperate determination. Dr. Roberts watched with growing fascination. "When was the last time Emma saw the bear?" she asked suddenly. "She hasn't," Liam answered, helping Rose try to calm their daughter. "We've kept her away from the monitoring station. It's not safe." Dr. Roberts exchanged a significant look with Dr. Winters. "I think she's trying to tell us something," the behaviorist said quietly. "This connection might be stronger than we realized." Against conventional wisdom, but guided by Dr. Roberts' expertise, they decided to bring Emma to see the mother bear one last time. The wildlife team created a safe viewing area at a respectful distance, ensuring there was no risk to the baby while still allowing visual contact. The moment Emma saw the bear, her crying stopped abruptly. She leaned forward in Rose's arms, making soft cooing sounds that seemed eerily similar to the gentle grunts the bear cubs made when seeking comfort. The mother bear, who had been lethargic and declining rapidly, raised her head at the sound. "Remarkable," Dr. Roberts whispered, documenting the interaction with her camera. "She recognizes your daughter." What happened next defied all scientific explanation. The mother bear, summoning strength that should have been beyond her depleted reserves, dragged herself to her feet. Her cubs tumbled around her paws as she stood, swaying slightly, her eyes fixed on Emma. "She shouldn't be able to stand," Dr. Winters murmured, her medical training at odds with what she was witnessing. "Her systems are shutting down." The bear took one halting step forward, then another. The wildlife team tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but Oliver held up his hand. "Wait," he said softly. "Just watch." The mother bear stopped at the edge of the enclosure that had been built to protect her and her cubs during their recovery. She reached one massive paw up to the mesh barrier, not clawing or pushing, but simply resting it there. Emma, in a gesture that made Rose's heart nearly stop, reached out her own tiny hand toward the bear. "She's saying goodbye, Doctor," Robert said, her scientific detachment giving way to emotion. "She knows." In that profound moment of connection, something shifted in the atmosphere around them. Davidson, standing slightly apart from the group, stepped forward with sudden decision. "Doctor Winters," he said urgently, "what about a liver transplant?" The veterinarian looked startled. "For a wild bear, it's never been done. The cost alone would be—" "Price is no object," Davidson interrupted, a new fire in his eyes. "If we can arrange it, Blackwater will cover all expenses. We owe her that much." The radical proposal set in motion a chain of events that would once again transform the quiet community of Pinewood Forest. Specialists were flown in from across the country. A temporary surgical facility was constructed adjacent to the monitoring station. The procedure, experimental, dangerous, and without precedent in wildlife medicine, was scheduled for exactly 1 week after the bear had first stumbled into the Collins clearing. Throughout those tense days of preparation, Emma's behavior remained unusual. She seemed to fluctuate between periods of contentment and inexplicable distress that aligned eerily with reports of the mother bear's condition. Dr. Roberts stayed with the Collins family, documenting every instance of what she now firmly believed was a genuine psychic connection between baby and bear. "There are documented cases of children forming empathic bonds with animals," she explained to the skeptical but increasingly open-minded parents. "But usually with domesticated species, cats, dogs, horses, never with a wild predator like a bear. What Emma is showing us could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication." The morning of the surgery dawned clear and cold, the forest glittering with early frost that crunched beneath the feet of the assembled medical team. The donor liver, from a bear that had died naturally in a reserve 2 states away, had arrived by helicopter at midnight. Everything was ready. Rose and Liam stood at the edge of the surgical field, Emma bundled warmly in Rose's arms. The baby was unusually calm, her blue eyes fixed on the temporary structure where the mother bear had been carefully anesthetized and prepared for the groundbreaking procedure. "Whatever happens today," Liam said softly, his arm around his wife's shoulders, "we've all been changed by this. The whole community has." He was right. The events of the past week had transformed Pinewood Forest in ways no one could have predicted. Davidson's company had already begun the watershed cleanup, employing dozens of local residents who had previously viewed Blackwater mining as an environmental enemy. The Wildlife Recovery Center plans had been fast-tracked, with construction set to begin the following month. And most remarkably, people's attitudes toward the forest and its inhabitants had undergone a fundamental shift, from fear and exploitation to respect and coexistence. 6 tense hours later, Dr. Winters emerged from the surgical unit, her face showing the strain of the complex procedure. A crowd had gathered, not just the official team, but dozens of Pinewood residents who had come to show their support. They fell silent as the veterinarian approached. "She's stable," Dr. Winters announced, her voice carrying in the hushed forest clearing. "The next 48 hours will be critical, but the transplant itself was successful. Her new liver is functioning." A collective exhalation of relief swept through the crowd. Davidson, who had paced anxiously throughout the entire procedure, stopped in his tracks, his weathered face showing naked emotion for perhaps the first time in his adult life. But it was Emma who provided the most remarkable reaction. The baby, who had been quietly observant throughout the long wait, suddenly let out a delighted laugh. The same joyful sound she had made when the bear cubs were first born. She clapped her tiny hands together, beaming with a happiness that seemed to radiate outward, touching everyone present. Dr. Roberts, who had been documenting every moment, shook her head in amazement. "I don't care if my colleagues think I've lost my scientific objectivity," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That child knew before any of us that the bear would survive." The days that followed brought healing, not just for the mother bear, whose recovery exceeded all medical expectations, but for the entire community of Pinewood Forest. The story of Emma and the bear spread far beyond their small corner of the world, drawing attention to issues of environmental responsibility and wildlife conservation. Davidson, once the face of corporate indifference, became an unlikely champion for sustainable practices within the mining industry. 3 weeks after the surgery, on a perfect autumn day when the forest blazed with the colors of changing leaves, the mother bear and her cubs were ready for a soft release into a protected area of the forest. A special viewing blind had been constructed to allow observers to witness the event without disturbing the bear family. Rose and Liam were given places of honor, with Emma settled comfortably between them. The door to the enclosure was opened, and after a moment's hesitation, the mother bear emerged, her 3 cubs tumbling around her feet. Her coat, once matted with toxic oil, now gleamed healthy and thick in the dappled sunlight. She paused, sniffing the air, then turned her head directly toward the blind where Emma watched with wide-eyed fascination. For one breathtaking moment, the bear seemed to look directly at the baby, a look of such profound connection that even the most skeptical observers fell silent in awe. Then, with a gentle huffing sound to gather her cubs, she turned and moved with renewed strength into the forest that was her home. 6 months passed. Winter blanketed Pinewood Forest in pristine snow, then gradually yielded to the tender green buds of spring. The Wildlife Recovery Center that Davidson had promised was now a reality. A state-of-the-art facility nestled harmoniously among the trees, its design specifically created to minimize stress for its animal patients while maximizing their chances for successful rehabilitation and release. Emma had celebrated her first birthday, surrounded by an extended family that now included Oliver, Dr. Winters, and even Davidson, who had become something of an honorary uncle to the little girl whose innocent compassion had changed the trajectory of his life. Emma was walking now, her first tentative steps quickly giving way to confident exploration of her world. She spoke a few words, Mama, Dada, and most amusingly to everyone who knew her story, Bear. Spring brought with it a new development in the Collins family. Rose was pregnant again, her gently rounded belly promising a sibling for Emma by late summer. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one deeply connected to the cycles of the forest around them. The mother bear and her cubs had been spotted occasionally by the wildlife monitoring teams, healthy, thriving, and staying well within the protected area established after their ordeal. But beneath this peaceful surface, trouble was brewing. Blackwater's transformation from environmental villain to conservation champion had not gone unnoticed by the industry. Specifically, by Horizon Resources, a rival company whose CEO, Victor Chambers, viewed Davidson's radical change of direction as both a personal betrayal and a threat to the industry's bottom line. "You've gone soft, Marshall," Chambers told Davidson bluntly during a confrontational lunch at the company headquarters. "All this money you're pouring into environmental initiatives? Your shareholders are getting nervous." Davidson had smiled thinly, unruffled by the implied threat. "Our stock price has never been higher, Victor. Turns out consumers appreciate corporate responsibility. You should try it sometime." The conversation had ended there, but Chambers was not a man who accepted defeat graciously. Within weeks, rumors began circulating about Horizon's interest in the undeveloped northern section of Pinewood Forest, a critical wildlife corridor that connected the bears' protected area with the larger wilderness beyond. "They can't possibly be granted permits," Rose said worriedly one evening as she and Liam discussed the news. Emma played at their feet, stacking blocks only to knock them down with delighted giggles. "Not after everything that's happened." Liam's face was grim. "Money talks, Rose. And Chambers has political connections that Davidson never cultivated. He's been meeting with state officials all week." The situation escalated rapidly. Geological survey teams from Horizon appeared at the forest's edge, their equipment and vehicles a jarring intrusion on the peaceful landscape. Local opposition formed immediately, with Davidson ironically finding himself leading the environmental coalition against his former industry allies. Dr. Roberts, who had extended her stay in Pinewood to continue studying Emma's unique abilities, noticed something concerning. "Emma's behavior is changing," she told Rose one afternoon as they watched the little girl playing in the garden. "She's becoming agitated, especially when she looks toward the northern section of the forest." Rose had noticed it too, the way Emma would suddenly stop playing, her small face turning toward the distant trees with an expression of distress that broke her mother's heart. Sometimes she would say "bear" in a questioning tone, her eyes searching for something she couldn't possibly see from their cottage. "You think she still has a connection with the mother bear?" Rose asked, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Dr. Roberts nodded thoughtfully. "I believe what Emma experienced with that bear established neural pathways in her developing brain, connections that allow her to sense things beyond normal human perception. And right now, she's sensing something wrong." That night, an unexpected storm rolled through Pinewood Forest, bringing with it driving rain and winds strong enough to bend the tallest pines. Rose was awakened just after midnight by Emma's frightened cries. She found her daughter standing in her crib, pointing urgently toward the window, repeating, "Bear! Bear!" with increasing distress. "It's okay, sweetheart," Rose soothed, lifting the child into her arms. "The bears are safe in their den. It's just a storm." But Emma would not be consoled. Her little body was rigid with tension, her eyes fixed on the rain-lashed darkness beyond the window. When Liam appeared in the doorway, roused by the commotion, Rose gave him a helpless look over their daughter's head. "Call Oliver," she said suddenly, a mother's intuition aligning with her daughter's inexplicable connection. "Something's wrong." Oliver arrived 20 minutes later, soaked to the skin despite his rain gear. His face confirmed their fears before he spoke a word. "There's been a landslide in the northern section," he reported grimly. "All that survey work Horizon was doing destabilized the hillside. The heavy rain did the rest." "The bears?" Rose asked, unconsciously tightening her hold on Emma, who had finally exhausted herself into a fitful sleep. "We don't know yet. That's their territory. But in this weather," he shook his head, "we can't get a team up there until morning." None of them slept the rest of that night. As dawn broke, the storm passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by nature's fury. The northern hillside had collapsed, sending tons of earth and rock cascading into the valley below, directly into the protected area where the mother bear and her now half-grown cubs made their home. Against all advice, Rose insisted on joining the search team. "Emma needs to be there," she said firmly when Liam protested. "If anyone can help find them, it's her." Dr. Roberts backed her up. "Emma's connection is our best chance. Conventional tracking methods won't work fast enough in this chaos." And so they went, Rose carrying Emma in a sturdy backpack carrier, Liam hovering protectively at her side, Oliver leading their small team through the devastation of broken trees and shifted earth. Davidson joined them at the forest's edge, his face tight with fury when he saw the extent of the damage caused by his competitors' reckless surveys. "Chambers will pay for this," he promised, helping Rose navigate a particularly treacherous section of trail, legally and financially. Emma, who had been unnaturally quiet since waking, suddenly became animated. She pointed urgently toward a dense thicket of undergrowth that had somehow survived the landslide. "Bear!" she called, her voice ringing with certainty. "Bear there!" Oliver approached the thicket cautiously, signaling for the others to stay back. He crouched down, examining the ground, then looked back at them with surprise. "Fresh tracks," he confirmed. "At least one adult bear moved through here very recently." They followed Emma's directions, the little girl leading them on an unlikely path that zigzagged through the devastation. Twice she directed them away from areas that looked passable but proved dangerously unstable when tested. It was as if she could see a map that was invisible to the adults. "There!" Emma cried suddenly, pointing toward what appeared to be a solid wall of fallen trees and earth. "Bear hurt." Oliver approached first, his experienced eyes searching the jumble of debris. Then he saw it. A dark shape nearly hidden beneath a fallen pine, only the slight rise and fall of breathing revealing that the animal was alive. It was the mother bear, pinned under the massive tree trunk, her powerful body trapped but protecting something beneath her. Her cubs, all three alive and unharmed, sheltered by their mother's selfless act. "She must have sensed the landslide coming," Dr. Roberts whispered, awestruck by the bear's instinctive sacrifice. "She used her own body as a shield." Davidson took immediate charge, radioing for the specialized equipment they would need to free the trapped animal without causing further injury. Within an hour, a full rescue operation was underway, with veterinarians, heavy equipment operators, and wildlife specialists working together in a race against time. Emma watched it all with intense focus, occasionally making soft sounds that eerily mimicked a mother bear's comforting grunts to her cubs. The three young bears, now separated from their trapped mother, responded to these sounds, staying calm when they should have been panicking. "She's keeping them calm," Dr. Roberts realized, documenting this extraordinary interaction. "She's communicating with them on their level." The rescue was painstaking and dangerous. The mother bear's injuries were severe: crushed hind legs, internal bleeding, a punctured lung. Twice, during the delicate extraction, her vital signs faltered, and the veterinary team had to perform emergency procedures right there on the forest floor. Throughout it all, Emma remained their secret weapon, her presence somehow keeping the injured bear conscious and fighting. When at last the massive tree trunk was lifted and the mother bear was carefully transferred to a specialized stretcher, Emma reached out from her carrier on Rose's back, her small hand extended toward the suffering animal. "It's going to be okay," Rose whispered, not sure if she was reassuring her daughter or the bear. Perhaps both. The mother bear was rushed to the Wildlife Recovery Center, her cubs following in a separate transport. For 3 days and nights, the veterinary team worked tirelessly, performing multiple surgeries, administering experimental treatments, refusing to give up on the animal that had become a symbol of resilience to the entire community. Emma developed a fever on the second night, crying out in her sleep and clutching her abdomen where the bear had suffered the worst internal injuries. Dr. Roberts stayed with her, documenting this physical manifestation of the child's empathic connection. "It's as if she's feeling the bear's pain," she explained to the worried parents. "Their nervous systems are somehow linked in ways our science hasn't begun to understand." On the morning of the 4th day, Emma's fever broke suddenly. She sat up in her bed, looked directly at her parents, and said clearly, "Bear better now." An hour later, Dr. Winters called from the recovery center with astonishing news. The mother bear had turned a corner overnight, her vital signs stabilizing, her will to live asserting itself against all medical predictions. The connection between child and bear had once again defied scientific explanation. What no one could have anticipated, however, was how this second miraculous recovery would capture the world's imagination even more powerfully than the first. International media descended on Pinewood Forest. Environmental organizations pledged support, and researchers from prestigious universities arrived to study the phenomenon that Dr. Roberts had begun to document. Most significantly, Victor Chambers found himself facing not just local opposition, but international scrutiny. Photographs of the injured mother bear, contrasted with images of Horizon's destructive survey equipment, created a public relations nightmare from which there was no corporate escape. Within weeks, Chambers was removed by his board of directors, and Horizon Resources announced a complete withdrawal from any development plans in Pinewood Forest. But the most profound change came in the form of legislation. Inspired by the extraordinary events in Pinewood, and spearheaded by Davidson's newly formed Environmental Coalition, the state passed the unprecedented Emma's Law, groundbreaking protection for wildlife corridors and critical habitats that would serve as a model for conservation efforts nationwide. Summer arrived, bringing with it new life. Rose gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Oliver, after the forest ranger whose quick action had made everything possible. The mother bear, though permanently disabled by her injuries, had been given a permanent sanctuary within the Wildlife Recovery Center's spacious grounds. Her cubs, now nearly grown, were being prepared for eventual release back into the wild. On a perfect July morning, when Emma was 18 months old, Rose brought both her children to the special viewing area where the mother bear could be safely observed. Emma, now a confident toddler with a vocabulary that grew daily, pressed her small hands against the viewing glass, her eyes locked with those of the bear who had changed her life before she could even understand what that meant. "Bear friend," Emma said clearly, a smile of pure joy illuminating her face. The mother bear, who had been resting in a patch of sunlight, raised her massive head and looked directly at the little girl. Then, in a gesture that left even the most scientific observers breathless with wonder, she lifted her paw and placed it against the glass directly opposite Emma's tiny hand. Two mothers watched from opposite sides of a boundary, Rose with her newborn son in her arms, the bear with her nearly grown cubs playing nearby. Between them stood Emma, a living bridge between worlds that had once seemed impossibly separate. Dr. Roberts, who had extended her research indefinitely to continue documenting this extraordinary relationship, captured the moment on camera. The image would eventually grace the covers of scientific journals and popular magazines alike, becoming an iconic symbol of the potential for harmony between humans and the natural world. "What do you think she'll be when she grows up?" Liam asked softly, coming to stand beside his wife as they watched their daughter communing with her unlikely friend. Rose smiled, tears of gratitude and wonder shining in her eyes. "Something amazing," she answered. "Something that will help us all remember what she somehow knew before she could even speak, that compassion is the most powerful force in the world, and that the boundaries we create between ourselves and nature exist only in our minds, not in our hearts." As if understanding these profound thoughts, Emma turned to her parents, her face alight with the pure wisdom of childhood. "Bear family," she said simply, pointing to the mother bear and her cubs. Then she pointed to her own parents and baby brother. "My family." Finally, she spread her arms wide, encompassing the forest beyond, the sky above, the earth below. All family. And in that moment of perfect clarity spoken through the lips of a child, the true miracle of Pinewood Forest was revealed. Not just the saving of one bear family or the protection of one forest, but the recognition of a deeper truth that had the power to heal the ancient wounds between humanity and the wilderness that had once been our only home. The story of Emma and the bear would be told for generations, inspiring countless children to look at the natural world not with fear or the desire to conquer, but with the same innocent compassion that had allowed one tiny girl to forge a connection across the species barrier. Books would be written, scientific papers published, and conservation efforts launched, all tracing their inspiration back to that extraordinary moment when a baby saw a pregnant mother bear covered in oil and responded not with fear but with love. And in the heart of Pinewood Forest, where the boundaries between human settlement and wilderness had been redrawn with respect rather than dominion, the legacy of that compassion would continue to grow, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching lives both human and wild in ways that would transform the world, one heart at a time. 10 years passed. Emma Collins was now 11 years old, a slender girl with thoughtful blue eyes and an uncanny ability to connect with animals that continued to astonish researchers. Her younger brother Oliver, now a robust 10-year-old, had developed his own unique gifts, a brilliant mind for ecological systems and a determination to protect them that matched his namesake's. The Pinewood Wildlife Recovery Center had expanded into an internationally recognized research facility, drawing scientists and conservationists from around the world. Marshall Davidson had retired from Blackwater mining to devote himself full-time to environmental advocacy, using his business acumen to prove that conservation and economic prosperity could coexist harmoniously. On the 10th anniversary of the miraculous bear rescue, a special celebration was planned. The mother bear, now elderly by black bear standards but still regal in her sanctuary enclosure, was the guest of honor. Her 3 cubs, long since released into the wild, had established their own territories within the protected forest, occasionally glimpsed by tracking teams who monitored their progress from a respectful distance. Emma, dressed in a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, stood before the gathered crowd. Residents of Pinewood, scientists, journalists, and government officials who had come to commemorate what many now referred to as the miracle of Pinewood Forest. "I don't remember everything from when I was a baby," she began, her young voice clear and confident despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. "But I remember feelings. I remember knowing that someone needed help, even though I didn't have words for it yet." She turned toward the sanctuary enclosure where the mother bear rested in the dappled shade, her once glossy coat now grizzled with age, the scars from her injuries visible beneath her fur. "She taught me something I've carried with me every day since, that the language of compassion needs no words to be understood." Dr. Eleanor Roberts, whose decade-long study of Emma's unique abilities had revolutionized the field of interspecies communication, stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes. What had begun as a scientific curiosity had blossomed into something far more profound. A new understanding of the neural and emotional connections possible between species when barriers of fear and misunderstanding were removed. "Thanks to Emma's law," Emma continued, "thousands of acres of critical habitat have been protected. Hundreds of animals have been rescued and rehabilitated. But the most important change isn't something you can see on a map or count in numbers." She paused, looking from face to face in the crowd. "It's the change in how we see ourselves in relation to the natural world." As if on cue, the elderly mother bear rose from her resting place and approached the viewing area. The crowd held its collective breath. Though safe behind specialized glass, The bear's massive presence commanded instinctive respect. She stopped directly before Emma, her dark eyes finding the girl's face with unerring precision. What happened next would be described differently by everyone who witnessed it, filtered through their individual perspectives and beliefs. Some would call it a trick of the light, others a scientific phenomenon yet to be fully understood. Still, others would use words like miraculous or divine. The mother bear placed her paw against the glass, exactly as she had done when Emma was a toddler. But this time, as Emma raised her hand to meet it, something extraordinary became visible to everyone present. A subtle luminescence where their touch connected, spreading outward in gentle waves of golden light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their heartbeats. "We are all connected," Emma said softly, her voice somehow carrying to every ear despite its gentleness. "Not just to those who look like us or speak our language, but to every living being that shares this planet." The luminescence grew stronger, expanding beyond the point of contact between girl and bear, embracing the entire gathering in its warm glow. People later reported feeling a profound sense of peace and unity in that moment, a dissolution of the artificial boundaries between humanity and nature that had caused so much suffering on both sides. Liam and Rose watched their daughter with tears streaming unashamedly down their faces, their hands clasped tightly together. Little Oliver stood beside them, his young face alight with wonder and understanding beyond his years. For the Collins family, this moment was both an ending and a beginning, the culmination of a journey that had begun with a baby's innocent compassion, and the start of a new chapter in humanity's relationship with the natural world. As the golden light slowly faded, the mother bear remained at the glass, her gaze never leaving Emma's face. In her eyes was a wisdom accumulated through years of suffering and healing, of motherhood and sacrifice, of learning to trust across the divide of species. And in Emma's eyes was the reflection of that wisdom, transformed by human consciousness into something that could be shared through words, through actions, through the policies and practices that would shape generations to come. "Thank you," Emma whispered to the bear, words meant only for her unlikely friend, but somehow heard in the heart of every person present. "For everything you've taught me, for everything you've given us all." The mother bear made a soft, chuffing sound, a bear's expression of contentment and recognition. Then, with the deliberate dignity of age, she turned and made her way back to her favorite resting spot beneath the old oak tree in her sanctuary. As the crowd dispersed, moved too deeply for immediate conversation, Dr. Roberts approached the Collins family. "In all my years of research," she said quietly, "I've never found adequate scientific language to describe what Emma and this bear share. Perhaps some connections transcend our capacity to classify them." Rose smiled, one arm around her daughter's shoulders, the other holding her husband's hand. Emma called it simply when she was little, she remembered. "All family," she said. "Maybe that's all the explanation we need." Later that night, as stars appeared in the velvet sky above Pinewood Forest, Emma sat alone on the porch where her extraordinary journey had begun. The distant sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the occasional call of a night bird, the soft movement of creatures going about their business in the darkness, created a symphony that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. A deeper sound joined the nighttime chorus, the distinctive huffing of a black bear, moving through the forest with her own offspring, teaching them the ways of survival and coexistence. Not the mother bear from the sanctuary, but one of her daughters, now raising cubs of her own in the protected wilderness. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the connection that linked her to that bear and to all living things. a golden thread of compassion and understanding that had begun with a baby's instinctive recognition of suffering and grown into a force powerful enough to change laws, hearts, and minds. In that peaceful moment, as human and animal shared the same starlit night with mutual respect rather than fear, the true miracle of Pinewood Forest was complete. Not in dramatic rescues or scientific breakthroughs, though these had played their part, but in the simple recognition that had begun with a baby and a bear, that compassion is the truest language of all, understood by every heart that beats beneath the same sky, drawing breath from the same air, sharing the same precious home that is Earth. And somewhere in the depths of the forest, as if acknowledging this truth, a mother bear paused in her nighttime wanderings, raised her head to the star-filled sky, and released a gentle sound of contentment that drifted on the night breeze all the way to the porch where Emma sat, closing the circle that had begun with oil and pain and transformed into healing and hope, a circle wide enough to embrace all living things in its perfect, compassionate completeness.